I'm Dr. Patrick Quirk. Today we're talking with you about anxiety management. I'm talking to my video audience, but also to some of my interns and my office staff. So when I'm not looking at the camera, know that I'm not just staring into space, I'm looking at the other folks in my audience. Anxiety, we talk about anxiety and depression as being what you call the common colds of psychology, okay? That's really a thing that marks almost anybody that comes into you for therapy, almost no matter what kind of problem they have. Anxiety and depression are often a component of that. And what you have going on there is these are naturally existing mood states, but they are, when they become out of balance and too extreme, then they become really problematic. And so I want to first share with you the law I read about in my general psychology class a really long time ago, when it was my freshman year of college, that really changed me from being an engineering major to being a psychology major. And it's because what I think really appealed to me was there was a clear kind of principle at work here, something that you could chart out and make sense of. And this is called the Yerkes-Dodson law. And what it says is this, that the fancy way of saying it is the relationship between anxiety and performance is curvilinear. Now what that means is this, it means a modest amount of anxiety actually makes you better at things, okay? Because you're paying enough attention to make sure you don't screw something up. If you're too casual, then you don't pay enough attention to details, you will make mistakes, you won't do as well. So you want just enough to get you to really be on your best game. But once you get too anxious, then everything goes wacky, okay? Then you just get too excited, you make much more mistakes, you can't keep things in perspective, you can't manage your thoughts well. So anxiety works up to a point to focus you and give things importance, but past that point it does damage. Another way I like to say this is really a nice way to hold on to this is that my capacity for competence and clarity of mind on any single issue and my emotional intensity of that issue work in inverse proportion. The more loaded I am with intense emotion about something, the less clarity and competence I have, okay? The more I can pour off that emotion, the more clarity and competence I gain, okay? And so that's what we're looking to achieve here, is get that optimum kind of clarity and competence. What I thought about also, and this will ring a bell for anybody who's ever played sports or watched the sports, is at the point I had this class, I was probably like 18 years old, and I was really interested in sports. Not that I was a great athlete, but I was really interested in sports, and I was interested in sports psychology. I thought, this is a choke. That's what a choke means. It's when you have a guy who could literally shoot free throws in his sleep. You know, the final point of the game, a couple seconds left, is all in the balance, he dings it off the rim. That's the Yerkes-Dodson law. That's the choke. Okay? So that's the thing to get is that resolving anxiety and really managing anxiety, because you're not going to get rid of it, is a naturally existing phenomenon. It's even purposeful for us. But getting it under better control allows you to sink that shot, allows you to have that greater level of precision. So anxiety is not a terrible thing if it's well managed, okay? And it really makes you much more effective when you can manage it well. So we're going to go from this basic general concept to my much more involved model. You've seen this model. If you've watched my videos before, you've seen this model before. This is a model I developed, again, a really long time ago in my master's program, decades ago, when I was trying to figure out how all the pieces of the psychological experience fit together well. And so this may not make perfect sense to you immediately, but once I start talking to you, I think it'll make a lot of sense to you. And as we look at this, we'll also come to understand how it is that we are able to control this experience of anxiety on a lot of different levels, okay? So what I'm going to start out with is I'm going to start out with our environment, okay? And in this case, I'm starting out with your developmental environment, because the reason I'm anxious in this situation right here has probably more to do with my history, particularly my developmental history between 0 and 18 years old, than it does have to do with what I'm actually facing, okay? Because everything I've experienced, particularly in my developmental years, becomes programmed deeply, not just into my thinking brain, but into my feeling brain and all aspects of myself that gives me an immediate response to situations. So if I had an experience a long time ago, in my developmental years, and something comes along here that in any vague way resembles that original threat, it's going to fire this response. And that's a really important thing to get about our responses, is to realize that we're not just responding to what's in front of us. We're always responding to our entire learning history. And again, the earlier it happened and the more powerful the emotions were around it, the more powerful that learning is, okay? And so when we start out with is some general things that I've seen in thousands of people over decades of time that play into anxiety, okay? So if we're talking about particularly developmental years, I'm talking about, one, the phenomenon of rejection. whether that rejection is something which is intended or just feels that way. I mean, how many parents have tried so hard to do every single right thing, and the child comes away with a completely different meaning, okay? And so to realize that it isn't even always intended, but it's effect. Or it could be social rejection. But one way or another, I've tried to present myself with the best I have, and it has essentially been criticized or rejected. That embeds and imprints, okay? And I'm going to get into more of the details of that. I'll hold on the rest of that, but that's our starting place. The next thing we get into is neglect or isolation, okay? So you'll see people struggling with anxiety who basically in their developmental years particularly just didn't have a lot of connection, okay? A lot of how you develop your sense of security, your sense of self, your sense of confidence in the world is born out of the mirror that's held up to you by the world, okay? I'm putting something out, I'm bringing something back. I'm putting something out, I'm bringing something back. If what I put out is received in a way, it doesn't have to be every single time we have a party because you said your first word or you made a good potty, but basically that the world is giving me some kind of functional and positive feedback and a real connection to me, I'm comforted by that. I feel more secure in myself. I feel like, it's like the thing I was saying earlier about I do so much better in presentation where I can see people's eyes than if I'm just talking to a camera. Because that feedback makes me feel good. It makes me feel comfortable and secure and like what I'm saying maybe makes some sense, okay? So the same thing is very true in your developmental years. Or again, it can be social isolation. It can be a thing where, for 100 different reasons, some people who have to move a lot, I may have that somewhere else, but basically who are moving a lot, new kid, always the new kid, you're feeling isolated. Or you may not be as cool a kid as other kids, so you're getting isolated. You may live in a neighborhood that doesn't have any kids. It could be all kinds of things, but you're feeling disconnected. And again, that creates a sense of discomfort. We are made to fuel off human interaction. Anybody who proposes a theory that suggests that I am an entity in and of myself doesn't understand us at all. We are made to be very social beings, physically, psychologically, spiritually. We're supposed to do this. And so our isolation is a big one. Excessive demands, okay? Whatever the circumstances are. When more is put on us, let me say this well, to a certain point, demands and challenges are critical for making us the best person we can be, okay? But if my absolute upper limit is right here, and you're dancing here, then you're getting me, I'm pulling up to my best level, and pretty soon that level is going to go up and I can dance to that, okay? But if my very best level is here, and the world's demanding this of me, I'm pushing my outer limits, but it's never enough. And that gets embedded as well, okay? Let's see. Instability and insecurity, okay? That's everything from, like I said, the mention that when I was growing up, my dad worked for IBM, which stands for I've been moved, okay? And so in my first 10 years of life, we lived in 5 different places, okay? Now, happily, once we landed in Huntsville, Alabama at 10 years old, that's where we stayed. But I can absolutely look at the issues that my siblings struggled with, a number of my siblings struggled with, related to those moves. It just shook them up, and you still see it to this day. It really did shake up their capacity for that sense of security. Certainly things like divorce is certainly a tremendous instability, financial and economic instability. Okay? And again, when I say each of these things, remember that principle I said about we wanted to meet all of life. We want life to have demands. If you have someone who has basically an easy life, that person is weak, lacks depth of character, lacks tenacity, and so on. You want to be pushing it, but when you exceed it, that's when you begin to do damage. Okay? Let's see. Aggression and threat. Okay, that's a real overt thing that literally, one way or another, I'm being threatened, whether that's in my home from an abusive parent or whether it's from bullies on the playground or whatever. That is the optimum for anxiety because anxiety is one manifestation of the fight or flight response. We say fight or flight. So there's a range there. Anxiety is obviously on the flight side of that, okay? It's, I got a threat, I got to get out of here. And if you're physically threatened, well, my goodness, that's definitely going to create an embedded response. Let's see. Dysfunctional models for interpretation. So this is a situation where you can have a parent or someone else who models for you a bad response to things, okay? And I was talking to a fellow the other day, and this happens all the time, so it's not really about a specific person, but he was just talking about feeling really insecure in this moment, okay? And called his mom, and his mom stepped in and said, yeah, boy, I think that's something to be worried about. Man, I'd be worried about that too. You might lose your job. It's like, I didn't call you for that, Mom. Oh my God, but you understood in that, excuse me. In that, part of why this guy has the problems he has is because his very loving mother, who just loves him so much and wants to protect him, has her own model that she's seeing the world through. And all she knows is to give her the best she's got from that. And this fellow's mother was a very fearful person. So it wasn't that she would think that when she offered him what she offered him, she was meaning to give him the best she had. She thought she was helping to protect him. Yes, you should be afraid. You know, in truth, he shouldn't have. There wasn't a big deal going on. So it's a really important thing to realize that people can give you in the most loving way their model, hoping, and whether it's a model of you should be scared or a model that says always be your very best, which sort of sounds cool at first. But depending upon how that's presented, it can say, okay, if I ever fall below that, well, then I'm just screwing up. And so we've got to think about how we interpret is such a big deal. So this is not everything, but it gives you a feel, and I hope what it's doing for you is getting to think about your own life and your own circumstances and the things that have come up in your life that would play into some of this. So that becomes the programming. Now, talk about how does the programming work. As I take in experience, particularly in our developmental years, everything that happens to me becomes part of me. That's why we're made. In those developmental years, we're pulling it in and we're structuring a whole framework for reality and existence based on those experiences. And so the way I say it is that I interpret my experiences through my thoughts, through my cognitive psychology, my thinking part. I give the experiences meaning, okay? And so these things happen to me, it tells me something. And the way I say it is it tells me kind of in three general categories. It tells me something about me, okay? So rejection could say something like, I'm just never good enough, okay? Or neglect and isolation could say, I'm alone, I don't fit, okay? So that's the belief about self. The next one we can go to is we can talk about beliefs about people in the world, okay? Based on those other experiences, I get a default program for the nature of the world and people, okay? And so if I experience rejection in childhood, there is a default response that says the world will be rejecting of me, okay? If I was abandoned or neglected by people, the anticipation is that people will abandon or neglect me. If I was attacked by people, then I will assume that that's what happened. Not because I'm even choosing that. These things all become very automatic, okay? And then the last one is, okay, how do I handle that? If I think about how do I handle that, I'm going to figure out all kinds of things. One, it says, okay, always try to be just as pleasing as you can with everybody you meet, because then they will not be threatened by you and they'll be nice to you, okay? Or watch people for the way they're going to betray you and head them off before they get there. So always be on top of things, always be kind of aggressive, okay? We get these different kind of things that in the circumstances they came from, they make good sense. They were functional adaptations there. The problem is now you're stuck with that, whether it's functional or not in your new experiences. And so I gave a couple of examples. One is basically in this thinking area, is just worry. Basically worry, I'm just anticipating one or another kind of threat. And then irrational or distorted interpretations about self and the world. That's what I was just talking about, is that we get these beliefs and they aren't even something that we question or something that we even analyze as it happens. It's just reflexive. So I have experiences, I develop interpretations from those experiences. Then what happens is from those interpretations, the interpretation creates feelings, okay? So I have experience, I interpret it, it creates a feeling. So if I have an experience where I meet a challenge and I step up to it, then the belief is I'm capable of reaching challenges. If I have a challenge that's this much above what I'm capable of, then it says I'm never quite good enough. So see how that works. Now from that, then come feelings, okay? And I put, under feelings, I put two things. I put emotional patterns, and then I put physiology. Now, the truth is there's really not a separation there, because the reality is every emotion in space is a biochemical process. As soon as you have an emotion, there is such an array of things that release. One of them is that your hypothalamus will immediately release millions of molecules of that emotion. They're actually chemical representations of that emotion that then flood through your bloodstream and your lymph system and plug in anywhere into your nervous system where there's a receptor site. So that's why we call them feelings, okay? It's because they are fundamentally physical things. When people say it's all in your head, not all in your head, okay? You can feel it. When you feel emotion, you feel it in the biggest places we feel it are where we have the highest representation of nerves and receptor sites. So that is in our GI area, in our abdomen. It's in our heart. It's in our throat, and it's in this area right here, interestingly. Okay? And so when you feel emotion strongly, you can feel it that. That's why people say, my heart's breaking. My stomach has butterflies. And so literally these things are programmed into those parts of your body. Okay? And so we start with feelings like insecurity, dread, low self-esteem, inadequacy, fear, apprehension, guardedness, paranoia. Okay? As soon as those fire, Now what I've got is a physiological response. We'll call it generally anxiety, but then we got all kinds of physical response, physical parts of it, things like muscle tension, GI problems, headaches, sleep disturbance, and fatigue, and many other things, okay? The reality is that probably something in the range of almost 50% of what presents in general practitioners' offices is anxiety-driven problems, okay? Because literally it stirs up your physiology so badly. It's a big piece of what plays into it. It certainly is a huge piece of all kinds of headaches, all kinds of GI problems, ulcers, irritable bowel, that sort of thing. Anxiety is a big piece of that. So what we get is then we get this sort of fueling up, which is the feelings create we're getting intense physical response, and the physical response intensifies the feelings, okay? Do you ever have a cup of coffee with the intention of it waking you up, and instead what it does is make you nervous and irritable, okay? That's a situation where the physiology, the chemistry that you've introduced there creates an emotional response you didn't anticipate, okay? But they feed on each other, and then I spin out a behavioral style, okay? So I have experiences, I interpret them, it creates feelings, feelings become physical, and then I spin out a behavioral style. And behavioral, where are we? Okay, got physiology, okay, here's our behavioral style, behavioral pattern, okay? So different things for different people, but they become sort of predictable and automatic. So some examples when we talk about that anxiety thing is let's see, withdrawal, compulsive, people pleasing, being compulsive, driven, perfectionistic, defensive and guarded, ingenuine, and contention. And I hope you can kind of play through each of those in your mind. These are all the responses that people do reflexively responding to the feeling of threat, okay? So it's everything from being incredibly gracious and accommodating, because if I'm really nice to you, you won't be mean to me, to being guarded and careful and reading everything people say, to being outwardly aggressive yourself in hopes of being able to basically intimidate and put that person off, okay? And again, these aren't thoughts, these are reactions. So this is what we get. This is the ongoing process. Now, what happens is this, is once I get out of that original development environment that created these patterns, where in fact they probably were actually productive, now I've got a program running that's automatic, unconscious, it happens. And so I go into new situations, okay? And so say I go into a new job situation, okay? And I'm in a new situation where there's a lot of new stuff for me to learn, is that automatically, without a thought in my mind, I can begin to get all kinds of reactions that play off that history. And so I think that what I'm seeing is truth. I think what I'm reacting to is an accurate assessment of what's going on, when in fact what I'm reacting to is this whole dance, this whole thing that I do, okay? So what do we do with it? How do we deal with this? I could do an entire doctoral degree on just this thing, so spending a few minutes to understand is superficial, but here's some real key things. When I think about intervening on anxiety, I kind of sequence it, okay? And one of the first things I do is some combination of really starting with that physiological emotional response, because I've got a whole other model that lays these things out in terms of sort of what I call levels of depth. And the real heart of this thing is that physical emotional response. And you can feel that. I mean, how many times have I had people say to me, I know better than this, but this is what I'm feeling. Well, yeah, that's pretty much why I have a job. If we could think our way entirely out of our feelings, I'm not sure my career would even exist. And so the first thing we go is that physiological response. And there's different things we do. Okay, one of them is medication is a reasonable option. We got to be careful with that, because one, people will often consider medication to be the solution. The biggest problem with these medications that are used is they work. Okay? And people will then say, well, I have a natural biochemical tendency towards anxiety. I have treated that now, so I'm okay. Well, that's probably not true. Okay? And what happens is, if I'm not fixing everything else in this program, what happens is eventually the rest of this program overrides the medicine. So people will say, I've gotten a tolerance going to this. Well, no, actually you haven't. What's going on is that the rest of the system is just kind of overpowering that. It would be sort of like, I've hurt my back working too hard in the backyard. Okay? And so I go to the doctor gives me some anti-inflammatories. I don't let it rest and heal. I don't go for physical therapy to really learn how to lift well. I don't develop those muscles well, but I keep working. Well, what will happen is, eventually, even though I'm still taking that anti-inflammatory, my back's going to start hurt again, because the damage is so great it overcomes it. So I want you to think about it that way. The medicine is great, big fan. Most of the people I treat, at least while I'm treating them, are taking some kind of medication. safe ones. There's ones that aren't so safe, but the safe ones. But you got to realize there's more than that. Okay. So the next thing I go to is just a really good. You want to have really well developed what I call relaxation strategies, techniques that you can use that will help you to bring control over that anxiety pretty quickly. Okay. Now there's some great apps out there that I knew I should have done those apps 12 years ago, but I was a little bit busy with other things. But some really smart people have done some really nice apps, and there are things like Headspace, Calm, Breathe, and there's several other ones that do all kinds of really clever things to help people to relax. But I'm going to give you a real simple one. There's 3 parts to any good relaxation intervention. There's breathing, there is mental focus, and there is some kind of muscle relaxation. So I'm going to give you a real simple one to do. And obviously, if you're in a public place, you do this low key. You don't make it obvious. Or if you're in a bathroom and you can take a little moment, then you can be a little bit more obvious. But we'll start with breathing, okay? Shallow chest breathing is anxiety breathing, okay? Deep diaphragm breathing, where your belly pushes out, is relaxation breathing. And so people who have ever taken voice or played a musical instrument know about diaphragm breathing. Your belly pushes out. When you do, not only do you get the oxygen in, but your body gets a message about relaxation. And then when you exhale very slowly. Purse your lips like you're blowing out a candle. You exhale as slowly as you can. The more deeply you inhale, the more slowly you exhale, the more completely you can relax. And every time I do this, I'm about to do it for you now, I'm surprised at how well it works. So I'm going to show you what it works like, and you can do it with me. So what I want you to do is, as we're going, the breath comes in deep, and stop for a moment, exhale real slowly. And as you do, you're focusing only on the breathing. You're focusing on the air coming in, on the air coming out. Focus on releasing the muscles in your shoulders, your neck, your entire body. Okay, so again, ready? Take the breath in. And exhale. Slow as you can. Let the facial muscles relax, your shoulders droop down. Slowly, 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 slowly out. Okay, what do we get?
Feels relaxing.
Good, good. Any other comments? That worked? Okay, good, good. That's a really easy one. Now we add to that the muscle component, okay? So what we can do, again, you're not likely to do this if you're at the office. You'll look a little weird. But you go to the toilet stall in the bathroom, you can do that okay. So it goes like this. As you do a stretch out, you inhale, and then as you release the stretch, you release the breath. So it goes like this. Do it with me, come on. And then down. Good, good. You feel that additional release, okay? What we're doing is we are engaging these parts of our body, and we're taking them in the direction of relaxing. And the thing is, all the other parts of anxiety, like release of adrenaline, you know, and increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, all those things slow down when you slow this down. You slow the whole chain of anxiety down. So that's a really good one. The other ones we go to is things like regular cardio exercise. You know, if we think about fight or flight response, what does it say? Fight or flee. So you need to do things that are like fighting or fleeing, okay? Because that's what your body wants to do. And so one, when you feel anxious, if you then go and do some exercise, it's great, it discharges it. But also if you just do it daily, what happens is, you change your chemistry. You get a much greater ongoing level of serotonin, norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine, endorphins, and enkephalins, all these things, all these neurochemicals, neuropeptides that have to do with peace of mind, sense of confidence, okay? Sense of feeling strong. It doesn't just make you relax. These also give you a sense of confidence and a sense of strength as well. And so regular cardio on a regular basis is one of the really big things, is it changes the whole way you see the world. It makes you much tougher. It makes you more of a warrior as you go into life, okay? Let's see, what else can we say about this? So we have medication is really good. You know, relaxation exercise are really good. Cardio exercise is really good on a physiological level. You watch things like caffeine and alcohol, okay? Because although I love coffee, I don't have that much of it, but boy, it does great things for me, the energy it gives you. But it is basically a cup of anxiety. And so you really have to be careful about how much you take in, because at a certain point it stops being just energy and it starts being anxiety and irritability. So caffeine is something to watch and be very careful with. Alcohol is also one, because what alcohol does is, however much it takes your nervous system down in terms of relaxation, is how much it bounces back up when it comes out of your system. You don't go back just as normal. Your whole system becomes more anxious. The extreme version of this is things like alcoholics who have DTs. That's what's going on. They've gotten so attenuated to it that when they come off it entirely, their body goes into spasms and convulsions. And so like I said, I don't think you're going to do that, but watch those sort of things. So physiologically, that's a good start. Obviously, other things like good diet and sleep as well are important. And really, physiological and emotionally, that's doing a lot. Now, next thing we can go to is environmental factors. One of the first things I look at in therapy is environmental factors. Where are you putting yourself every day? Now, it is not only is it not possible, it's not even a good idea to say, I don't ever want to have any stress in my life. I mean, literally, when you do that, your brain starts to atrophy. The pleasures centers of your brain shrink down when you don't have enough challenge. So you need challenge, but you want the challenge to be right here and not up here. You want it to be at the limits of your capacity. That makes you better, wiser, stronger. Okay, and so, but you want to really look at it and say, okay, do I have a situation that's just terrible? Am I in a situation? Am I in a marriage, for instance, that I've just hung in there because I feel like this is the right and decent moral thing to do, and it's good for my kids and so on? It's destroying me, and in truth, it's probably not very good for my kids or anybody else. And so I may have to change my environment as part of that. Okay, and like I said, don't always. Our natural tendency is to see all of life's problems as lying from my nose out. Okay, that whatever the problem is, just fix it out there, I'll be fine. Well, that's not how the world works. So we're not saying change your circumstances or fix your anxiety, but we're saying take a look at your circumstances and see if there's something you need to do about that. We go to the cognitive work next. Cognitive is recognizing, and we're going to do some other presentations entirely on cognitive psychology, but it's basically recognizing the ways in which I distort information as it comes in. And each of us has some standard ways we do that, okay? One of a real common one is perfectionism, okay? That basically, for things to be okay, I can never make a mistake. Now, we shouldn't try to make mistakes, and we should try not to make mistakes. But if I put the standard that severe that says, things will not be okay, life will not be okay, I am a bad person, I will be in trouble, I'll be in danger if I make a mistake. One, that creates anxiety, and two, like I said earlier with the Yerkes-Dodson law, it actually makes me make more mistakes. So I have to have more moderate perspectives on that. I will do the best I can, I will learn more every day, and if I make mistakes, I will learn from them, okay? That's a much more reasonable thing. And also in this, there can be that tendency to project onto my environment, the world around me, the expectations that I put on myself or that were put on me when I was young. And that may or may not be true in this situation. And so you want to get clear what are actually the expectations of my circumstances. Let's see. And like I said, you really want to, it's so helpful to look at what is my history. Okay, what is my history? And without being too personal, I saw a lot of struggle, a lot of failure in my childhood with the number of moves we had and troubles that some of my siblings had. And there became a really resolute attitude in me that I am not going to fail. Okay? Which on one hand is kind of a good idea. That's kind of a cool thing to go under. But when you make it absolutist in character and I can never make mistakes, that begins to create unreasonable anxiety, makes life miserable, and makes you fail more. Okay? We go down here, we talk about behavioral strategies. Okay? One is things like, how do I work? Okay? How do I organize the way I work? All right? And so I need to look at things like pacing of what I do, organizing of what I do. Is there a way I put things on me that really make things unreasonable and uncomfortable? Do I need to reassess how I manage that sort of thing? Also in terms of my relating with people in the world, okay? Is that I may have a manner which grows out of desire to make people happy, but in fact it doesn't. And so it may be a thing where basically I am so sort of walled up and not sharing things that people are free to kind of guess what I'm thinking, which is not a good idea. People need to know, you need to communicate to people what your intentions are. Okay? And so often when we're anxious, there can be not enough kind of warmth and human connection, which creates connection, makes things safer, also is reassuring to that person your own positive motives. Okay? And so we have to look at what we're doing there. So that's, now the one I've left for last is this, and again, if I use that other model that we'll have up here plenty of other times, I'm looking at this stuff about this emotional experience as being the absolute core. Okay? That is where all the power of this stuff lies. It's the very unreasonable, driving aspect of what makes our lives hard, gives us anxiety. And so we get into here really working on resolution of those deeply embedded programs that drive me unconsciously. This gets into an area, this is really, each of these things you can do to an extent on your own. I do recommend psychotherapy. Generally you get an expert, they're going to do it much better with you. But most of these things you can do some of with yourself. This one, you really just need a professional to work with you. And there are techniques that are often called, sometimes they're called trauma resolution techniques, sometimes they're called experiential techniques. I like to use the word emotion-focused therapies because it makes a sense. It's like, we're working on emotion with all these things. If I work on my thinking, it'll hopefully change my emotions. If I act differently, it'll hopefully change my emotions. If I put myself in a different environment, it'll hopefully change my emotions. But if I go directly to the emotions themselves, because like we said, these programs are based on history. They're not necessarily self-correcting when things changed in the now. I keep having a new and positive experience. Saw a lady yesterday who grew up in a situation that was very unsafe and insecure. But unlike so many people like her, she married very well coming out of that. She married a really nice man, strong, compassionate, supportive guy. And so she knows that. But on an emotional level, she's still always on guard because she's got another program that was embedded early on that even though she's had 30 years of marriage, she's still feeling that stuff. Okay? And so these techniques, and there's techniques like in this realm, Sigmund Freud was the first person to do these kind of techniques. He used to do hypnotic regression therapy. And he was brilliant at it. There's a whole other story about that, interesting stuff about how that all worked. But that was the first stuff that my wife and I started doing in the 1980s when we were part of the original work that created the National Children's Advocacy Center. And when that happened, all of a sudden, we were inundated with all these adults who were saying, oh my goodness, is there treatment for us now? And we said, I think so. Because nothing we learned in graduate school had taught us about doing this work. And certainly the kind of cognitive behavioral therapies fell way short of what these people needed. They had horrible unresolved trauma. And the first thing we found our way to was doing that original work that Sigmund Freud did, the hypnotic regression work. There are all kinds of techniques. There are retreat centers. It's a place called On-Site up in Franklin, Tennessee that does wonderful, immersive kind of work like this. There's things like something called psychodrama or sculpturing, which are very physical, interactive processes. There's a thing that y'all may have heard about goes back a long time ago. Nobody does it now, but it was an early one called primal scream therapy, where people would get in and just scream about what they were doing. I've got some bataka bats in the other room that you can beat on a pillow with. These are things to get stuff up and out. And the technique that was developed about 30 years ago by a woman named Francine Shapiro is one of the dumbest sounding techniques you've ever heard. It sounds ridiculous. It's just almost like magic the way it works. It is so much more effective than anything else that I've seen. It's called EMDR, which stands for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprocessing. I will reserve another whole presentation to talk about that, but it's one of the most ridiculously effective things we've ever done. And in short, what it does is it replicates the healing properties of rapid eye movement sleep, only amplifies them dramatically. I'll hold that for now. So what we're looking at is all of this, okay? And the thing is that anxiety is not going to go away. It's not only a naturally occurring experience, within limits, it's a really good thing. And so it's not about eliminating it, it's about using it and managing it in a way that really lets you be optimum in each moment. And one of the key things about the anxiety response is, the anxiety response chemically is very, very similar to the feeling of excitement, okay, or inspiration, or there's a lot of difference between anxiety and anger, okay. So we're dancing in a realm of other kinds of excited emotions, and we can do some things in terms of what we say to ourselves and how we manage that emotion that actually change anxiety to excitement. So wouldn't it be cool if you were getting ready to make a presentation like this one, and you're going, oh my goodness, I'm going to screw this up, and you let that physical stuff, and you begin to say, well, this is going to be cool. I'm excited about this. I know this stuff. I just have to go into it slowly, get comfortable with it. This is going to be I'm going to have a really good time with this. And now that anxiety has become excitement, and that's communicating what you do. And so recognize, like I said, anxiety management is a really good word because you're managing it. You're working with it. And whether you're just trying to bring it down and balance it more with other processes, or whether you're trying to have it mutate into one of these other things, that's what you're doing. You're working with it. The key thing with this is, one, to recognize it exists, okay? To strive to get better and better at managing it. And when you do that, everything else gets better. Your marriage gets better. Your relationship with your children gets better. Your physical and emotional health gets better. Your job performance gets better. Everything gets better because you are making this machine work better. You're becoming a much more effective entity. And that's what I want to go with. So, if you like what we're saying and you'd like to hear some more, please go below and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.